On this episode of AV Week, we talk Dante's USB-C adapter, a chip shortage is hitting Pro AV, and touchscreens don't transmit COVID. All this and more on this episode of AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 504, Dragging Pro AV.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Atlas IED, innovative audio solutions for every business environment, and by FSR, and by
Sennheiser. For over 75 years, Sennheiser has been a leader in pro audio and is now offering a wide variety of touchless and traditional audio solutions for both corporate and educational campus-wide audio.
Welcome to this episode of AV Week. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. This week I'm filling in for Tim, and I'm pleased to be joined by Willie Franklin. He is a senior technology specialist at, and I didn't ask the name of your university. I'm sorry, Willie.
Glorious Otterbein University.
Otterbein University, opposed to the undisclosed location that's currently sitting in my spreadsheet. Then we have Mr. Frank West. He is the VP of Systems America for QSC. How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Thank you again, both of you, for joining us. And we've got to have a little fun, because when Tim's not here and we do this flawlessly, everyone thinks it's super easy for him. So we got to make it look like it's a bit of a challenge. Gentlemen, we're going to start this off with with a story that comes to us from AV Network. Audinate is shipping a Dante AVIO USB-C adapter. It is one of the first USB-C adapters on the market. It's going to give you the ability to deliver and receive 2 channels of audio over the Dante network. Willie, let me start with you on this. USB-C is still fairly new in the Pro AV space. It's been on Macs for a while, on PCs for about a year and a half, I would say. It's still pretty new. Is this really the starting point of USB-C being prevalent and being that next evolution of USB technology in the Pro AV space?
You know, I would love to say without hesitation that's an absolute yes, but at Otterbein in Westerville, Ohio, we really have not had the opportunity to see much with regards to USB-C utilization on campus. 99% of our users are still working by way of standard USB or HDMI. So when it comes to USB-C, we have a few systems that have come on board, or few users, I should say, that have come on board, and mostly in the Mac environment. And what that means for me and my role from an event staging standpoint is basically having the appropriate adapters so I can grab that user's content and make certain that it's a part of the show, whether it's a venue like this, they're on our local radio station on campus, or whether we're doing a live event pre-COVID in one of our event centers. So I really, at a personal level or professional level, haven't seen much utilization of USB-C thus far.
Can you roadmap, or are you starting to roadmap when that's going to become more prevalent?
We're really, I'll be honest, we're having a hard time doing that because there are so many unknowns with COVID right now. And I don't want to stick specifically to COVID as kind of a backstory to all of that. But a lot of our planning, a lot of our conversation is based on what's happening in the here and now, and of course what data we're gathering about the needs going forward. As we look at our needs going forward, looking at events, looking at budget as we're looking to integrate new technologies, there's always that question of, what are our users' needs? How are they using technologies? When clients come in the door and we're interfacing with members of the public or business partners who visit our institutions, there's that need assessment. And again, we're just not seeing data that seems to be indicating that thus far. Now, I'll also preface that by saying that Otterbein University is a small liberal arts college with a little under 3,000 full-time students, which means unlike a big university that has, say, 60,000, 50, or 40,000 individuals across its campus, that technology consumer market, if you will, it can be vastly different. So being a small footprint of technology users out there, we have a smaller demographic of users and demands that provide that data that drives innovation on our campus.
Yeah, very good. Frank, when you look at this, the thing that kind of threw me off is it's going to be obviously an evolution to USB-C. We will get to the point where USB is essentially the VGA, right? Original USB 1, USB 2. But it's not like when you look at USB originally, it's like two iterations. USB-C is more the connector opposed to a bandwidth. It's everything from 480 megabits up to 20 on the Thunderbolt side. How do you go about trying to manage that deployment of looking at utilizing USB-C, but ensuring that you're like it's almost going down the vein of HDMI and all of their fun versions and headaches that come with that?
Yeah, and I think obviously this isn't an example of the consumer industry is going to drag the professional industry along. And as USB-C becomes more prevalent on devices, it's what people are going to be carrying into conference rooms. And also, as you start seeing USB-C more on displays, I think that's what people are going to want to use. So the two areas that I'm most interested in for this connector, the first one would be in the bring your own meeting scenarios where people are going into a room that maybe it has a soft codec computer already in the room, but the user wants to use their device and or their soft codec of choice. USB-C is a great way to enable that type of experience for people. So you're going to need some sort of endpoint at the desk that has the ability to ingest that. Likewise, I think it could really simplify and potentially make the video streaming market a lot more cost effective by, as we start seeing displays on it, USB-C video streaming devices being more the norm for us going forward.
Do you expect to see, specifically kind of from a QSC standpoint, do you expect to see for kind of the foreseeable future a situation where you're going to have integrators specify like a USB connection at the table as well as a USB-C connection at the table? Are we going to play that VGA HDMI game?
I feel, I guess my thinking is really more like if and when USB-C starts to replace HDMI as a standard connector, is HDMI going to die really fast, or is there going to be this tolerance to try to support the different connectors? You've got a dog in the fight.
Yeah,
but is there going to be a tolerance basically to have these multiple connectors available for people to support different infrastructures? And I think that'll be hopefully the AV consulting community and end users have never been more AV savvy than they are today, I believe. So they're going to have a vision for what they want to do, and it's up to the rest of us manufacturers to actually catch up to what the customer wants, because this is a big change, I think.
Yeah, very much so. I'm glad we were talking about the consumer industry kind of driving the Pro AV industry, because that leads us into our next story. This comes to us from Commercial Integrator. The global semiconductor shortage could begin to impact Pro AV. On the show that I host on a weekly basis on the residential side, we've been talking about the chip shortage for, almost pretty much since the year started. But we're just starting to see this affect the Pro AV market, especially from the display standpoint. Frank, when you follow this, when you see this, it has been dramatically affecting the consumer tech market. Everything from PlayStations to TVs to amplifiers. If you're trying to do residential AV, it is a significant challenge right now.
And I would argue that it's way more mainstream than that when you have companies like Ford Motor Company saying, hey, we can't build cars because we can't get semiconductors. Or I recently bought my son a gaming computer, and the manufacturer's ability to deliver is greatly slowed down because of this very issue. And it is there's been a number of factors. I mean, I think the one factor that's pretty obvious to everybody is that what we went through with COVID is you have this, how do you turn an economy down? And now we're trying to ramp it up. And it proves that it's a lot more difficult to ramp something up than it is to roll it down. So that's been one concern. And then there's been some disasters. I mean, we've had factories, the biggest one being the AKM fire. So AKM is the industry's largest, A to D, D to A converter manufacturer. Every professional audio company is using that, and their factory caught on fire, and they can't deliver products. So supply chain has been something that has been challenged through COVID, and I would argue that we're probably at the beginning of what could be a year or two or more of this kind of feast or famine wild ride. So from my perspective, forecasting and better vision, because I do still believe that the needs of the professional AV industry at large compared to, say, consumer or automotive, we're a rounding error. So like what is irrelevant to a Ford Motor Company is actually a lot for a QSC or, insert your favorite manufacturer there.
Do you think that's going to be the driving issue? Is, essentially that Sony's going to throw so much weight around to try and build PS5s that and again, I don't want to say QSC's dealing with this per se, but the manufacturers in the Pro AV space are just so small in comparison that they won't be able to purchase?
I guess that would be a risk. I like to think a little bit more optimistically, is that the demand that we have is much smaller, whereas when Ford Motor Company has to shut down a factory, that's pretty devastating. For us, it might mean that, the customer that's used to us shipping it the next day is waiting 3 weeks or something. That's really been kind of what we've seen with this. But I joke internally that I'm kind of an honorary member of our supply chain team, and I feel like our supply chain team works miracles all the time. We find things, and we're also while really quickly kind of trying to qualify as many alternate parts as we can, getting things through SQA. That's a little bit longer of a process, but we really feel like we started some of this exercise actually towards the end of last year. And, these are 6 to 9 month exercises where we're starting to look at the summer now. Not only do we have a really good inventory position on parts, but we've actually getting to the point where we've got some qualified alternatives. So we feel really good about our position today.
That's fantastic. Willie, when you follow this to Frank's point, will disrupt to some degree, most likely every manufacturer in our world. How do you go about trying to, kind of keep your thumb on the pulse as an end user, knowing that, you already have these somewhat elongated procurement processes? How do you go about knowing that when you're ready to procure that equipment, it's there?
Well, I want to go back and kind of grab Frank's last comment about qualifying alternatives, if you will. That's a big one to answer, right? And if I can, by the way, I'm glad we're on this topic because what comes to mind with me when you first began talking about it was the Ever Given ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal and what that means as far as products being unavailable. When you talk about semiconductors, and by the way, for anyone listening who don't have a sense of the size of that ship, we can all imagine a railroad car, a box car. So imagine a ship capable of carrying 20,000 railroad cars on it. And imagine the size of a small semiconductor that's a little bit larger than your thumb, if you will, and how many you can fit in that container. So the impact, not saying that that vessel was carrying semiconductors, but the impact to gaining access to cargo in a timely manner to manufacture products for the end user, be it cars, be it the interior of a car, being electronics that we're using here and today, it's monumental. So when you ask about qualified alternatives, what resources are there? We sit at the table planning at my institution, and we ask that very question. Where do we go? We've checked all of our handful of normal vendors and integrators for the needed products. This past, as we were leading into spring, many were out of stock. So then you go to alternative products, and do they meet the need? What's the tolerance? How will we use them? Are they internal deployments? Are they external deployments to our campus that are prone to conditions of weather and massive shifts in temperature changes? It can cause you to lose a lot of sleep, and indeed it does in some regards, because one, you want to be able to overpromise and underdeliver when we think about the resources and products that we provide to our campus community. Two, you're trying to stay within a very difficult budget, and three, you're trying to make certain that whoever is asking for that end product can be assured on your consistent reliability to deliver. And it means taking a gamble. When we go out and we search for those alternative products, we really are taking a gamble on products that, one, we do not have a track record with. We consult with our peers like yourselves who are in the field, who may or may not know the product and can speak to the reliability of it. And in some instances, these are high dollar value targets. You're spending a lot of your budget on that, or there's a high degree of risk that's associated with it. Some of our deployments with what I'll consider rare products right now went into our nursing clinical lab environment. So we're training medical professionals that are going to be treating us and our family members, right? And those devices have to work. Now, it's not to say that computer science and math, if something goes wrong in their learning environments, that there's not as nasty of a sting, but you can recalculate, you can solve that equation using chalk. But when you're trying to measure heart rate, pulse rate, when you're trying to differentiate on a visual image a difference between a minor rash versus a lesion that's an early indication of a cancer, there's a night and day difference on buying something that you can depend on and something that you hope will work. So I think that gives you a feel for that real world impact to us end users as we're selecting products, integrating it in, and what reliability really means at the end of the day.
My recommendation, whether it's an end user, a consultant, a channel partner, has been the same thing. Your chances of getting availability are much better if you provide me with a lot of visibility. So we can make more adventurous decisions in our business if we know our pipeline a lot better. And that to me is the ultimate thing right now. We have all the tools to do this stuff. And you talk about when you're planning things, you're not planning and purchasing in the same month, you're planning months out. So getting your key manufacturers involved in your planning so that they know what you need, I think is more important than ever. And we use Salesforce internally to try to track as much as we possibly can. And we really want to use that tool in terms of allocation too, so that people that do give us that visibility, we're going to prioritize their allocation over somebody else who calls me up and says, hey, I was going to buy your competitor's product, but they don't have it, so I want to buy yours. Well, I don't have enough to go around at this point. I mean, inventory is going to be very precious over the next couple of years, I believe.
Yeah. And Frank, you touch on a key point of building that relationship, and I thank you for clarifying that because that is so critical. I think too often, in fact, people will focus on the product and not so much the outcome, the experience. And indeed, we can't move forward successfully and work with you and your team if you don't know what our vision is. So cold calls are great for building that client relationship.
No, they're
but
not.
It's no way.
I tell everybody internally that'll listen, we don't sell used cars. We're trying to create long-term relationships with people so that there's a lot of companies that make a lot of good stuff. You don't always win on technology. You can win on just being a better partner.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that point. Speaking of trying to make everything work together, let's wrap this up with an article that comes to us from AV Magazine. The CDC is reporting that there's a low COVID risk from touching displays. This is, I was patiently waiting for this report and this article to come out. Essentially, it is less than a 1 in 10,000th chance of catching COVID-19 from a surface that has been contaminated by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Basically, you're not going to get sick from touching the shopping cart or the door handle or anything else. Stop walking around like this. Willie, when you see this, I'm trusting that your facility and most facilities didn't have the extreme gut check of, oh my gosh, we need to get rid of all of our light switches and our door handles and our touch screens and try to implement voice or some other form of interaction device, because touchscreens all of a sudden will kill you. When you see this, does this just solidify what we've all kind of thought as far as how we're not going to reimagine every single room and every single touch interface that we have?
Absolutely. We have not taken extreme measures on our campus. We've certainly have practiced reasonable caution, right? So we've increased the amount of touchless hand washing stations in all of our facilities. We've made certain that there is hand sanitizer available in offices, particularly high traffic areas for those who would like it. We've made certain to abide by social distancing guidelines. And I think when we can really consider common sense practices, if you will, and by the way, we're the Otterbein University Cardinals, so our committee that oversees the safety is called the Protect the Nest group, which is catchy, it's easy to market, and great buy-in. So that aside, one of our cardinal campaigns in protecting the nest is making certain that people are adhering to wearing masks when they're in those publicly shared spaces. When you're outside walking across the greens, it's a surprise to see how often people keep their mask on, but it's not a mandate. Once they enter the interior of the buildings and they're in those learning spaces, only then is that a pressing issue. So I think it's just common sense practices that are most important to us, not extreme measures. So we're not wiping down every doorknob. And by the way, we have town hall meetings monthly, which the entire campus community is invited to participate in virtually. And we do get some interesting questions. One person asked, will the university, I'm trying to think of a polite way of phrasing this, put toilet seat covers in all the restrooms so you can close the lid on the toilet so that vapors do not bleed into the air and we inhale said vapors and the contagion continues. Because we don't have documented evidence to support that, you can imagine the expenditure that would mean financially for the institution to take that minus any solid evidence. A little pun there, solid evidence.
I got you.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there.
On that note, Frank, when you see this is, something that I want to say, a year ago, this was one of the hot topics.
As a matter of fact, the last time I was on this show, we talked about this.
We should have you on more often then. I feel kind of bad about that. But it's Tim's fault because, this isn't my show. But when you see this, because QSC produces and sells touchscreens, that was all the rage, was that you need to disinfect the heck out of everything, spray it down, bleach it up, all the stuff. How do you go about pushing the narrative, or maybe not pushing, but talking about the narrative that, okay, this has come out, the science shows that this is not ridiculous. How do you conquer that fear without sounding tone deaf and also protecting, not destroying your glass?
So when we were first coming into COVID and we had these concerns too, nobody's ever going to want to buy a touch panel again. Those days are over. My first response is I'd be more concerned about the doorknob than the touch panel, because everybody touches the doorknob. Maybe one person touches the touch panel in a meeting. We launched a campaign early on in COVID, what we call Bring Your Own Control. So our ecosystem, QSYS, has the ability to basically through QR codes and an app, we're able to turn your phone or your iPad into the room touch panel by just taking a picture of the QR code. ironically, the best place to put that QR code was on the touch panel that was in the room. So it was a little bit of programming, and so I think we still feel that there's this ability, no matter what the CDC says, there's always going to be people that have these phobias about germs. And we had them before COVID, and in some cases, probably people's got worse through COVID. So I think that there's always this having the flexibility of like, hey, there's a touch panel here, and you can use it. It's pretty safe, but we have options for other types of control. I think ultimately it's up to, an organization to determine, and obviously the end person to figure out what they want to touch and what they don't want to. But we did see through COVID that our sales of control panels, touch panels, actually grew. So it was something that we were a little bit wrong about early on. We were predicting the demise of the touch panel. It hasn't been true yet.
Is it not something where a lot of this situation has really just forced us to kind of take just a second look, right? You would think that the QR code to download that on your device isn't that big of a deal, but it's super helpful for someone who either can't reach it or sits at a different part of the table but is running the meeting, right? These are simple little things that I hope don't go away.
I agree. I mean, I think the idea of, if I need to do something dynamic during a meeting and I'm presenting, it's a lot easier to have the device on the UCI on my phone as opposed to walking back to the table where the touch panel is, or the wall for that matter. So I just believe in that hybrid experience is probably what's best going forward.
Excellent. All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have today. Frank, if people want to connect with you, learn more about QSC, where can they do that?
Email address is frank.west@qsc.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn, really easy to find.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Mr. Franklin, thank you, sir, for joining us just like 3 hours south of me, technically, kind of.
Yeah.
Little lake in the middle, but other than that, thank you for joining us. If people want to connect with you, learn more about Otterbein, how can they do that?
They can reach out to me, wfranklin@otterbein.edu. I'm also on LinkedIn, or you can find me on Twitter at Willie. Just very short. Willie Franklin, really.
That's awesome. Thank you both again. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on Twitter and pretty much every other social platform. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of AV Week.